So what I have for you today is the Radeon RX 550. This is the Sapphire Pulse model. You saw this if you've seen the GTX 750 Ti video. It was originally in the i5 system. I pointed out back then, but I'll reiterate now just in case you've missed that video. It is a single slot, low power card. Obviously RX 550, it's one of the lower end of the Polaris generation cards. As you can kind of tell by the heatsink on here, it's not a very power hungry little thing. This model comes equipped with 4GB of VRAM. You can indeed get a 2GB variant as well. Would probably recommend to hold out for a 4GB version, especially since I got this one for about £10, which puts it on the same price level as the GTX 750 Ti. Now, in theory, this has support for newer APIs than the GTX 750 Ti did, but at the same time, it's also a very low power card. Now, I'm not expecting any card to perform like the 750 Ti did in this sort of power range, but we don't know. We can always check. Does the 750 Ti give the RX 550 a run for its money? Advantage of this card, of course, being the mostly single slot design, the slightly newer architecture support that probably does have better support on Linux as well. But other than that, I would say it's probably a pretty close race between the two of them, considering that, like I say, you can get them both for about £10. And this is a 4GB version, which means this might be able to run titles that wouldn't run on the 750 Ti, or at least they wouldn't run properly. So things like Resident Evil 4 Remake and, that kind of game. We shouldn't be running into the same VRAM bottleneck that we were for then. Just a little bit of information on the card. It has 512 cores, 32 TMUs, 16 ROPs. This one is the 4GB variant with GDDR5. 128-bit memory bus, and it was released in April of 2017, so that makes it 3 years newer than the 750 Ti. This might be an interesting little project we've got here, but one way to find out, and that is to put it inside a system. We're going to bring back the i5 system. I'm going to get that set up for you, and we're going to install it and see how it runs, basically, So this is the i5 4460 system. Again, obviously we've got 16 gigs of DDR3. This is my son's little project box for learning how to build computers and things like that. So we recently swapped it in a GTX 1050 Ti. Sadly, we'll be swapping that back out now for the RX 550, but I can always put it back for him at the end. There we go. And that's it. No additional power requirements, makes this so easy to work with. I'm going to get the rest of it plugged in and then we're going to get cracking. When you think the jank can't get any worse, and I use an internal USB 2 to Type-C connector to connect my game drive. There we go, we're on internet. Thankfully we left DDU installed. I recommend doing this if you're going to use DDU, to prevent downloads of drivers from Windows Update when Windows searches for a driver. So Windows now can install drivers. Best idea. Clean and restart. And the reason why we want to stop Windows looking for the drivers itself is quite often Windows will find slightly older drivers, which is not what we want the newer drivers. So we'll just let DDU run and then we'll get the Radeon drivers, which I think we should actually be able to use the latest, or at least relatively recent ones. I recently tried this with the R9 290 and we had to use Catalyst drivers basically. Alright, nice, we're rebooting. We'll connect my internet back up and we will get on Firefox, get the Radeon drivers downloaded. Windows 10 and 11 drivers. Hopefully this card is supported by the newer drivers for this. There you go, Radeon RX 550 or 550 series. Install, and then we'll do another reboot, and then we'll get Valley on. Failed to initialize graphics backend for OpenGL. What? Oh. I wonder why it did that. Attempted the install for the drivers once again, only to be greeted by the same error. Of course, then I took to Googled the error and figured out it had something to do with Windows trying to install drivers. Who would have guessed? So we ran DDU again, we got the drivers installing again, and we're back in the game. Okay, there we go. Time remaining. Fantastic. 10 minutes. It's always about 10 minutes. It's never actually about 10 minutes. Curiosity, let's see how the CPU is doing. It's pretty loaded. It's not doing too badly, this old quad core. It's not even a 4670 or a 4690, it's a 4460. So a pretty pre-built range, I would say. A lower end i5 has well. I could upgrade it to the i7, the 4770 or 4790, it's one of those two. I could upgrade it to the i7, but it's a lot of faffing around, and as this is just a computer to test graphics cards on, I don't really see much point. Since the tests that we're doing on it aren't so scientific, they're more subjective, I think this i5 is doing fine. If it comes down to it and I need to install a better CPU or come up with a better platform, I'll figure that out when I need to. Ooh, we got the weird resolution back again. Ah, there we go, 1080p. There's something really nice about a monitor going back to 1080p when it's been at all kinds of weird resolutions. So for your basic Windows tasks, an RX 550 is going to perform perfectly well. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab Valley and Afterburner, and then we'll get down to potentially overclocking. I should have rebooted. Remember always to untick this. No one wants to surprise Norton 360 with their MSI Afterburner. We do need to do a quick reboot once we've done all this so everything is detected properly and everything like that. Don't show the readme. Start Afterburner. There's Afterburner. I mean, it detects it already, but we can also set up our monitoring. So we want temps, usage, memory usage, core clock, memory clock. I'll take an overall CPU temp, overall CPU usage, overall CPU clock, power, RAM usage, frame rate, frame time, average 1% low. We don't want commit charge, I don't care about that. Frame rate, frame time, average frame rate, and 1% lows. We can't look for GPU power usage for some reason. It's not something we have available. We'll say the starting up on just a quad-core i5 is a little bit slower than one might like. These CPUs definitely getting a bit longer in the tooth. But it's an older platform, and however, so long as it can still perform, everything's good. Okay, there's Afterburner, correctly identifying the GPU. And Valley high, we or Ultra, don't we? Ultra, anti-aliasing, X2, not full screen, and the resolution of 1600 by 900. I'm immediately going to increase my power limit, even though I can't see how much power we're using. All we're doing now is taking a look to see, make sure no artifacting happens. I mean, you get these things off eBay for £10. You've got to check for artifacting and things like that, but it should be fine. And then obviously we're going to try just a bit of overclocking. Just a smidge. Just a smidge. Try and get the most out of our £10 graphics card. Save frequently so you don't lose where you are up to. It's a 1325 now. We're at 1206 to begin with. 61 degrees. Card should be warming up now. Although it's still running pretty cool. 61, 62 degrees. It's pretty chilly in here at the minute, so I'd expect it to stay quite cool. Oh, there you go. Its fan just kicked up a teeny little bit. It's nice. That's what we like to see. Let's see if we can increase that memory clock as well. I'll try 1400. I'm not going to try 1450. 1400 might be too ambitious. Ah, see, 1400 was too ambitious. We have crashed, which is unfortunate. Okay, so it looks like 1350 might be the limit. Just keep it to 1350 and 1550 on the memory. I think that'll be fine. A little bit of extra performance, nothing too greedy. Okay, let's get to Steam. What game should we run? Should we do the same? BioShock Infinite, Tomb Raider, and then the Resident Evils, didn't we? Try and keep it consistent and do the same games. So yeah, we're going to do the same as we did last time. So we're going to do BioShock Infinite, very high settings, 1080p. So number 4 for very high, custom 16:9, and number 4 for 1080p. So we'll give this a run, we'll see where this ends up. I don't quite remember exactly what the 750 Ti got, but we could always check, or maybe you could check and tell me. We'll use Steam's overlay for this. So, we're looking 60s. This is very high settings, 1080p, 60 FPS. You notice the VRAM is less than halfway used, which is quite nice to see. I thought this is similar performance to what we had on the 750 Ti. That's kind of what I'm expecting out of this card, maybe slightly better based only on the fact that it's not going to be constantly running out of VRAM. Although this test is probably going to be nigh on identical, just because it's not even using anywhere near 2 gigs even on the VRAM. Could we potentially have got better out of the GTX 750 Ti just because it's better overclocking? Maybe, but the RX 550, slightly newer. I'm hoping, I'll be honest, me personally, I'm hoping the RX 550 comes out slightly better just because it's a slightly newer card. Because you would think that's how things work. This is what, 3 years newer than the 750 Ti. I would hope it performs somewhat better, even though they are all in the fairly low class of cards. They're very much in the budget area. As usual, we don't need to test Half-Life 2 on this. We will test Tomb Raider. I think I remember Tomb Raider's results. It was, is it 99 FPS average? So we're looking for the 99 FPS on average. We'll see if we get it. If we do, great. If we don't, then that's a bit concerning, really. It already looks lower. But it may all hinge on this VRAM. Like, we're in 1.2 out of 3.9 gigs. So really out of 4. So maybe it all comes down to that in the end. And we've got like Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 was a problem because it was always over the VRAM limit. This is definitely lower than a 750 Ti. And don't get me wrong, it's still over 80 FPS. It's still perfectly playable. It's just not quite going as high. So our highest FPS, I think, is around 99, and that was the average for the 750 Ti. Right, so yes, it is 20 FPS lower on average. It's still fairly consistent. It's all operating in this very close range, and it's well over 60. So if you locked it down to 60, you'd be looking lower GPU usage. But that's a bit of an eye-opener for that. It says to me that the card might not have the power to do Resident Evil 2. But only one way to find out, I guess. Let's see if we get better than 25 FPS. Hopeful. Oh yes, look at that. 70s, but we're still getting those stutters. That's not the best, but it's far more playable than 25. So let's just see if we can push things a little bit here. So if we remove FSR, give ourselves some texture quality, some aniso, shadow cache on, because that tends to make things perform a bit nicer. Screen space, turn those off, those are quite heavy. Maybe turn that down a bit, and shadow quality on low. Okay, I mean, it's more than double with higher settings. The audio's bugged out, which is nice. Okay, this is so much better. Like, don't get me wrong, it could still be nicer than this, and I think if you were playing, you might actually want to keep a little bit of FSR on. I think I crashed it. Although I have just noticed, CPU 99% usage. It's not a hard crash, possibly just a game crash. Okay, so aside from the crash with me messing around with settings there, I'm wondering if Windows is doing something in the background here, because CPU usage, RE2 still there, taking CPU usage, go away. What is it doing? Look at this! This is what we don't like about Windows. It's doing updates, right. I'm going to have to rerun those tests. 2 minutes of me complaining about Windows and its update scheduling, but basically yes, it turned out it was Windows updates choking down the CPU usage, so we sorted that, and then I got to rerun all the tests, as you'll hear from me in just a moment, as I furiously point at the screen. That was where the stutter was from. I'm going to rerun Bioshock, Tomb Raider, and get back into RE2, because clearly Windows Update was messing with our results there. Look at that, updates, I've got to wait for this now. I'm recording, Microsoft. No, here he goes again. And what follows is roughly 10 minutes of complaining and waiting for Windows updates. But don't worry, I've cut it down for you. Only the best bits. Seriously. Oh my god, it's still doing it. Oh, I hate Windows. Could have just left me alone, told me there were updates available, and just left me alone, but instead you wanted to install them. So it came back on, but forgot to turn my keyboard and mouse on. Microsoft, you had the most popular operating system, and then you did this. I'm turning it off and back on again. Worst thing is now, I'm going to have to do another reboot anyway, just in case it's still doing something in the background, because clearly everything is not alright. What are Windows widgets? WebView. We're not online. Okay, after some impromptu Windows updates, we are now in an offline desktop. We're going to run Steam offline, and I'm going to rerun some tests that were rudely interrupted by a Windows update. Guys, switch to Linux. Windows. Are you insane? I think the RX 550 is a fine graphics card. It's Windows that's going to cause all your problems. No! It now wants to wipe my game drive, despite the fact that my game drive was in use not 20 minutes ago. People call Linux gaming for being obtuse and hard work and things don't always just work, and then this is the alternative. And I know, I'm using Windows 11 on a platform that doesn't support it or anything, but I don't think that's got anything to do with this. What are you doing? Windows, have you just corrupted my game drive? Are you taking the piss? I'm plugging this into my Linux PC right now. Swear to God. And apparently I was so furious I did not notice that Audacity stopped recording upon plugging in the game drive. However, the next few minutes of camera audio very much capture the mood and are just too great to cut out. Enjoy. The whole drive still detects just fine, it's just Windows. Let's see if me plugging the drive into a Linux machine has decided to allow Windows to know that this drive is fine. Beeping that out. Just read the... Oh my Jesus Christ. It's not the drive's fault. It's your fault, Windows. Would you look at that? The drive is fine. And now to save you all the trouble of watching the benchmarks 3 times, we reran these after upgrading the i5 system to an i7-4790, still with the 16 gigs of RAM. However, with the i7 in there, it doesn't seem to bottleneck the chips at all and gives us plenty of headroom. So now let's roll on the actual benchmarks with a look at some actual figures so you can make up your mind for yourself whether or not the RX 550 is a suitable graphics card for 2025-26. Starting off, we have BioShock Infinite again, this time running at 1080p with very high settings. Going through the footage, it looks like the FPS tends to hang between 60 and 70 a bunch at the time. Occasionally it does go above this, but generally speaking it doesn't drop too much below it. We can see that the average FPS for BioShock Infinite, 1080p, very high settings. The average FPS is at 61, the 1% lows are at 49. It seems playable. You'll probably want to drop down to high settings to get those 1% lows at least a bit closer to 60, if not over 60, but it'll be fine at very high settings. Like I said, the average pretty good there at 61. Moving over onto Tomb Raider 2013, it's 1080p mixed settings. As far as I remember, these seems to be the exact same settings that I used on the GTX 750 Ti. We're looking at an average of 77 FPS and a 1% low of 62. This would be very playable, but the performance is lower than the 750 Ti, which did average 99 FPS. But this game doesn't take advantage of the higher VRAM on the RX 550, so it kind of shows that there's a bit of a weaker core going on, but you do get the more VRAM, which may prove helpful later on. Sadly, the good news doesn't start yet. With Hitman at 1080p low-medium mixture, we're looking at an average of 28 FPS and a 1% low of 23. This is really poor performance, even compared to the 750 Ti. It's sub 30 FPS, probably drop some more things to low or run the game at 720p. You might get the average to at least go over 30. Realistically, I would say this is almost not playable on the card. Sure, with CS2, it doesn't let me use MSI Afterburner, so we're having to rely on the Steam overlay and get some kind of idea just from sort of looking at the gameplay. It does look like the FPS is hovering 80 to 90 plus. We do see a couple of GCN stutters at the start, but it does settle down after a little while. We're using most of the VRAM, so we know we're getting decent performance. The GPU is at 100% utilization. So yeah, it looks like we're hanging above 70, maybe not scraping so high as 100 too often, unless we get into some of the really enclosed areas. But I'd say this is pretty good. It's about as good as the 750 Ti was really for Counter-Strike. Good for practice, probably not good for competitive. If you're just playing casually, I'd say you can happily get by on this. This is, by the way, at 1080p with the low settings, as we usually test it, just to keep a nice baseline on the game. Yeah, I'd say this is playable for casual play. If you were trying to play competitively, you would want something a little bit better than this, I feel. But you could get away with it for a little bit at least. Some good news, Elden Ring, 720p low settings, which is exactly the way we ran it on the 750 Ti. We got an average of 52 and a 1% low of 39.6, which is far better. I would actually say this is pretty much on your playable scale. Obviously I do the benchmark in the forest area and the little encampment at the start of the game, as they do seem to hit performance pretty hard. So if you were in some kind of dungeon or some more enclosed area, you're probably looking at 60 FPS locked, which is nice. It's definitely a suitable card to be able to play Elden Ring. Like I say, you're probably still not going to enjoy it too much. It's still below 60 FPS, but you can play Elden Ring on the RX 550. Where the good news really starts though is Resident Evil 2 Remake 1080p, FSR set to quality, everything set to low. We are looking at an average of 67 FPS with a 1% low of 48. I'd say this absolutely runs perfectly fine. You can likely bump some settings up a little bit without losing much performance. It's much better than the 750 Ti in the opening segment, which saw 25 FPS, where on the RX 550 we can see 60 or greater in the frame rate department. So this is where we're going to start to see the VRAM playing a massive part in it, as well as just sort of a newer architecture. I'm convinced the weather effects at the entrance to Raccoon City really do impact the older cards. And we're going to continue the good news streak. RE4 Remake, the Resident Evil 4 Remake, 720p, FSR set to performance, we're on low. It's 68 FPS on average with a 1% low of 57. This is absolutely perfectly playable. The game doesn't look great, but it actually performs. Now then, we also tested this at 1080p with FSR set to performance, still on low settings. We got an average of 39 and a 1% low of 33. I think you could lock this at 30 FPS playing at 1080p, where it looks far better than 720p. It performs similar to how the 750 Ti did at 720p, and it just looks far better. You can, if you're fine with playing at 30 FPS, this is perfectly playable at 1080p, FSR set to performance on low settings. But man, we're on performance, we're not on ultra performance. So at least you've got that going for you. Time for Peak. This is a fairly popular multiplayer game at the minute. It keeps going on sale every now and then. A great joy to play with your friends or family or stuff. I've played it with my son a few times. It's hard, but here we tested it 1080p with medium and low settings. We've got an average FPS of 55 and 1% lows of all the way down to 5. Some pretty heavy stutters going on. But it seems to be a decent game you could play with friends quite well. It works, and that may be all that matters. So, in conclusion, what do I think of the little RX 5? Well, it was cheap. Either a little bit cheaper than or the same price as the GTX 750 Ti. It does offer the extra 2GB of VRAM. It's a little bit newer. It's from a slightly newer architecture. It supports slightly newer APIs. But it is a bit of a weak card. I mean, we can tell this is a single slot, tiny little cooler, never really got very hot. Pretty good for low powered systems. It's more than just a display adapter. I think we can say that for sure. It can play some more modern games. And I think if you were bit more patient, you'd probably be able to survive a bit longer on one than I would. If you can get it for the same price or cheaper than a 750 Ti, go for it. If you can't, it's definitely not worth it. It's a good stopgap card, I guess is what the takeaway would be there. And if you've only got a system where you can only fit, say, a single-ish slot GPU in there, it's probably good for that too. But other than that, you're better off trying to find something that maybe costs an extra £5 to £10 or so, even if it's a little bit older. That would be my opinion on the matter. The 750 Ti already fills this niche. It's just that the card doesn't really seem to pack enough power to run things that require the 4GB. And in any games that don't need the 4GB, it falls behind a much older card. So, I'm sorry little guy, but I just don't think you're such great value. What's running this though? Oh, that one is pretty great value. So with that, thank you all for watching. Once again, if you're interested in these jank eBay graphics card finds videos, I'll be putting out many more in the future, just as soon as I can get around to doing them, I'll be putting out many more. So, if you're interested in this kind of thing, don't forget to just subscribe. Leave me a comment down below if I have touched on your favourite graphics card, a graphics card that you hated, or maybe just a graphics card that you own and you've got a memory of. I'm really interested to hear it. Like I say, get subscribed so you don't miss the next video. Don't really have an upload schedule just yet, but we'll get there. I'll see you next time. Bye bye now.